Backflip, Devour, Motorola, Noah from PhoneDog.com. What's up, everybody? How you doing? I'm here with two of the newest Android phones to hit the U.S. market. Motorola's just been cranking them out lately. I feel like I've met with them once a week for the past several weeks. I guess it's only been 3 weeks. Still, it's felt like a lot of Motorola lately. And these are the two MotoBlur phones that hit the big U.S. carriers. The Backflip, which is the first Android phone to hit AT&T, and the Devour, which is the latest Motorola Android MotoBlur phone to hit Verizon. They're both kind of, they're mid-range phones. It's interesting because we probably would have called these messaging phones not all that long ago, a year or so ago, but now they're on Android, so they are full-on smartphones, but both kind of, that messaging phone sort of sidekick style, kind of edgy design, mid-range price, not the huge displays that you'd find on a Droid or a Nexus 1 or an iPhone or something like that. But still, you get full QWERTY keyboard, 5-megapixel camera on each of them, capacitive touchscreens, Wi-Fi, 3G, all that stuff. So it's not like you're lacking in the spec department here. It's just what constitutes a mid-range phone is much greater than it used to be. The Backflip, of course, has the special Backflip form factor. The horizontal flip phone, touchscreen on the front, and then you open it up, you get your keyboard, and then on the back of the touchscreen is actually a trackpad for controlling navigation on the touchscreen. You also get a 5-megapixel camera located on the keyboard, so you can use it for self-portraits, or when the phone's shut, you can use it for taking pictures the old-fashioned way. The Devour, of course, a little more kind of that sidekick form factor, the all-metal aluminum unibody construction, touchscreen, and then you slide it up and you get the full QWERTY underneath. Both of them done up in silver and black, of course. Very similar, but how are they different besides obviously the form factor, the style, the design? Well, let's take a look. It's a dogfight between the two new MotoBlurs and the two big networks, the Backflip for AT&T, the Devour for Verizon. Alright, so Devour for Verizon here on the left. The screen just dimmed out on me, sorry about that. Devour for Verizon on the left. Backflip for AT&T on the right. Very similar devices in terms of form and function. They actually, even though Devour is larger, it's longer, noticeably longer, wider, and heavier than Backflip, and just 1/10 of a millimeter thicker. It looks much bigger. They both actually have the same size and resolution display, 3.1-inch capacitive touch, HVGA resolution. So the screens are the same. Both, there's a lot of bezel around both phones, and so with both phones it kind of looks like the screen is smaller than it really is compared to something like, here's the Droid, which has a smaller bezel, larger display, but when you look at these next to each other, the screen just looks huge on the Droid compared to these two. And it is larger, but anyway, just to kind of point out, the difference is that not only the actual size of the display, but also the amount of dead space around it can make. So, I know it's styling and production costs and everything, but I kind of wish they'd made these phones with smaller bezels around them. Anyway, 3.1-inch HVGA displays on both phones. Capacitive touch. The Devour has an optical D-pad down here on the bottom left corner. The Backflip has this crazy trackback navigational pad on the back of the phone, so you can use the touchscreen or you can go through and use the nav pad. Both phones have QWERTY keyboards. You can see the Backflip I've already opened up, the Devour I'll open up here, and so the Devour has kind of a more traditional horizontal sliding sidekick style keyboard, I like to call it. The Backflip has, of course, the crazy Backflip form factor. And the difference here, just to kind of talk about the screens and the keyboards and the D-pads and all that kind of stuff. The screens are pretty much even. The D-pads, I prefer the Backflip's trackback on the back. Once I got the hang of it, I thought it was really pretty easy to use. The D-pad on the Devour, it's okay, it's fine. It's kind of small, and I find myself it's harder to do precise things, whereas I'm more kind of swiping, kind of bigger gestures over it. I don't think it's that big of a deal because you don't use the D-pad all that much on a touchscreen device, but it is nice to have, especially for HTML, little HTML links on websites, that kind of thing. And in that case, I definitely, even though it's a little bit of a, kind of a quirky design that not everybody's going to love, I actually really like the trackback pad on the Backflip. I think once you get used to it, it works really well, and it's actually relatively ergonomic. It's kind of easy to get on those links right there as I'm showing you, just kind of mousing around in the back there. So a little bit of a thumbs up, a little bit of a nod to the Backflip over the Devour in that respect. The keyboards themselves, it's interesting. Motorola has so many phones out, and the keyboards are all so different on them. I prefer a keyboard that gives you some tactile feedback. That's kind of why I didn't like the Droid's keyboard so much. The Devour, to me, is a step up from the Droid in terms of a Motorola Verizon phone. We'll go to the browser here, and we'll type something in. Type in phone dog. And the keyboard, even though the buttons are smallish, because they're separated from each other, because they have, a decent amount of doming to them, so there's a decent amount of travel, and because they're kind of a nice tactile, soft grip plastic, I find them very easy to use, much easier to use than, looks like my Wi-Fi isn't connected now, much easier to use than the Droid's keyboard, like I said. You've got 3 rows of QWERTY, double with spacebar, and then a dedicated row for your numerical keys. And just very easy to get used to. Again, they're small, but because of the doming, and also you've got dots on the F and the J, which are kind of nice to orient your thumbs, and the separation between the keys, found it pretty easy to type on. The Backflip was interesting because when I first tried it, I was like, oh, this is great. And then after using it for a little while more, I was like, oh no, this isn't great, I hate it. And then after a little more, I was like, no, actually it's not bad. The keys are very large, which is nice. That's what you get from this wacky design. You don't have, the slider mechanism taking up any of the front panel there, which shrinks the available space for the keyboard. Instead, you get, because of the hinge design, you get much more space for the keyboard. So it's a huge keyboard, which is nice. The keys they're not separated from each other. They do have these little divisions in between them, those little kind of ridges, and they're somewhat domed. I'd prefer if you could have kind of this style keyboard, the Droid style keyboard, in this much space. That would kind of be the ultimate, I think. But instead, you're getting, kind of a cross between, or not as a cross between anything. You get, it's a little bit nicer, I think a little bit easier to type on than the Droid, a little tiny bit more feedback, and it's kind of a membrane style. But even still, there are some times when I'll be typing something and I'm not sure if I've pressed the key or not. See there, I was trying to type the quick fox over the lazy sheepdog. So that's not too bad. I think there are just certain keys that are maybe a little bit livelier than others, and maybe it's different from phone to phone. I would imagine with this kind of keyboard it might be. But like the Q, I sometimes, these keys up in the corner, the QW over there, I'm not sure if I've hit them or not. The T not registering, I think just had to do with lag in the phone recognizing that I had input. But, I definitely got used to it after a little while. Definitely not too bad. And, the superior tactile feedback of the Devour is perhaps balanced by the larger, the roomier keyboard on the Backflip. Not to mention the fact that I kind of prefer, rather than having a dedicated row for the numerical keys like I do on the Droid, here on the Backflip, to get to the numerical keys, you're doing, the Alt key with the top row of the QWERTY to get to the numerical keys. But then you have a row for shortcuts. So you've got the menu key down here, which is nice, the home key, the back key. You've got, those menu keys replicated on the keyboard, which is really nice. You've got shortcut for symbol, shortcut for messaging. You've got a D-pad here, cursor keys, which is kind of nice. And then you've got dedicated search and AT&T buttons as well. So I think the keyboard, I think it's kind of a toss. I think that the feels a little bit better on Devour, a little more functionality, a little more room on Backflip. So we'll call it a little bit of a toss-up. To note here on the keyboard, the camera is on the Backflip on the keyboard, and I actually think that's really cool because what you can do is you can use the keyboard. I can hear you guys now saying, Noah, you should have done the screen unlock settings before you started this video. What's wrong with you, man? So let's do that right now. Go to settings, display and security, screen timeout, 10 minutes.